Molini, and welcome to yet another episode of Conversations with Lankosi. Now, this is the news commentary section where we will be offering insightful commentary and exploring various perspectives on the stories that shape our world.
More than 208,000 students face being left unfunded by the National Students Financial Aid Scheme, known as NSFAS, over the next 2 years because of a projected 13.7 billion rands reduction in the funding of higher education by the National Treasury. This announcement has sparked concerns among students, parents, and education advocates. In today's video, we will dive deep into the potential consequences of such a funding reduction and how it could affect thousands of students next year. Now, before we delve into the details, let's take a look at what NSFAS is and the role it plays when assisting students that are pursuing higher education. NSFAS was established in 1991 as a response to the apartheid-era inequalities in South Africa's education system. It formally replaced the Tertiary Education Fund of South Africa, known as TEFSA, back in 1999 with the gazetting of the NSFAS Act of 1999. The scheme is supported by government funding and local and international donations. Its primary objective is to provide financial support to eligible students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds and cannot afford to pay for their tertiary education. The scheme offers various forms of financial assistance, including bursaries and loans to help cover tuition fees, accommodation, and other related costs. Over the years, NSFAS has been hailed as a crucial instrument for increasing access to higher education for marginalized individuals, ultimately contributing to the economic and social development of the country. As we consider the potential funding reduction, it's important to recognize the impact that NSFAS has had on thousands of students across the nation. However, due to various economic and political factors, there have been growing concerns about the sustainability of the scheme, leading to potential funding cuts. Now let's get into the potential consequences of a reduced NSFAS budget and how it could impact students. One immediate effect would be a decrease in the number of beneficiaries who can access financial aid. With limited funds available, NSFAS would have to tighten its criteria, potentially leaving out many students who would have previously qualified for assistance. Furthermore, a funding reduction could lead to an increase in the portion of funds allocated as loans instead of non-repayable bursaries. This shift from bursaries to loans places an additional burden on students, increasing their debt upon graduation and potentially limiting their postgraduate opportunities. Let us get into this article published by The Times Live. Quick side note, I'm not about to read the full numbers. I'm going to try and read. That's also one of the reasons I made sure is to attach this article here so that you guys can read with me. Okay. More than 208,000 students face being left unfunded by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme over the next 2 years because of a projected 13.7 billion rand reduction in university funding by National Treasury. A total of 86,000 students next year and 120,000 in 2025 could be affected based on a projected shortfall in funding of 5.5 billion and 8.2 billion over the 2 financial years respectively. These were the assumptions made by the Financial Aid Scheme's acting CEO, Masile Ramorwesi, to Parliament on Wednesday. He based his calculations on the 10% reduction in the budget over the medium-term expenditure framework period. The average cost of funding a student, which was 59,000 this year, is expected to increase by 6% to 63,000 rands next year and 67,000 rands in 2025. NSFAS dishes out financial aid to needy students from poor and working class families. It disbursed 33 billion rand to university students and almost 6.6 billion to those attending the 50 public technical vocational education and training colleges this year.
According to Ramorwesi, one of the risks of the funding shortfall will be NSFAS's inability to fund university and TVET students. Since November 21, it received 205,000 applications for funding from students for next year. Ramorwesi told MPs they had discussed the implications of the budgetary cuts with the Department of Higher Education numerous times. We emphasized the growing need for student financial support. We indicated that if these cuts are to happen, then we will have to implement other measures which will be possibly to limit the intake of students that we are supporting financially. Whoa. He said through the Higher Education Department, they also consulted with Treasury. They indicated that they have a challenge of the budget and that savings have to be realized from the different departments. We indicated our position and projections for them to note and consider. Petiwe Matutu, CEO of Universities South Africa, which represents the country's 26 public universities, said the department asked them to motivate why university subsidies should not be cut. I provided that motivation to the department's Deputy Director General, and I assume he will be able to use it when negotiating with the National Treasury on why these subsidies should not be cut. She said next year's first-time enrolling students were expected to be about 210,000, while the Central University of Technology in Mangaung can only accommodate 4.5 first-time students next year. It received 324,000 applications. Matutu said the Tshwane University of Technology received 309,000 applications for 15,000 places, while the University of Cape Town received 92,000 applications for 4,000 places. She flagged issues involving NSFAS, such as the lack of information from the entity on the 2024 allowance payment processes and the third parties involved. There are outstanding NSFAS matters of 2023 that will roll over to 2024, resulting in demands from students for issues to be resolved, such as allowances not being paid, referring to the missing middle students who automatically don't qualify for NSFAS funding because their annual family income is above 350,000 Rand threshold. She said there was no national system for funding them. Matutu said student debt was standing at about 16.5 billion Rand and that it needed a national solution. It is also a source of student anguish and upheaval at the beginning of each year. She said the universities of Stellenbosch, KZN, Limpopo, Western Cape, Pretoria, Zululand, Walter Sisulu, and the Vaal University of Technology had reported a shortage of accommodation for the next year. Lukhanyo Daweti, Secretary General of the South African Union of Students, said the union foresees a nightmare in January registrations around student accommodation at both universities and TVET colleges. He said funding for missing middle and postgraduate students remains unresolved. He also asked for clarity on the issue of the termination of the contracts of the four service providers, Izaga Holdings, Tenet Technology, Noraco Corporation, and Coinvest Africa, that were contracted to pay allowances directly into students' bank accounts. A damning report by Bergsman's attorneys and advocate Tembeka Mukatobi recommended that the service providers' contracts be terminated. Are we continuing with them or not continuing? For us to have a smooth registration next year, we are not in support of the bank charges that come with the solution. The service providers levied a 12 Rand monthly fee on NSFAS beneficiaries using the bank account, as well as fees for making withdrawals and purchases. For us to have a peaceful year next year, there ought to be an increase in student allowances. Otherwise, if that has not resolved, we are going to have a nightmare come January. Daweti said the Higher Education Portfolio Committee must support the call for an increase in the student allowances for meals and traveling. Students receive a monthly allowance of 1.6. NSFAS Board Chair Ernest Khoza said the Werksman's report was very clear that the termination of the service providers' contracts should be done in a responsible way, and that the guiding principle is that students should not be disadvantaged in the process. We did meet USAF last week and indicated to them that we will come back on how this should be done. We are dealing with this as a sensitive matter, and we are aware that we will face some resistance, said Khoza. We view the problems associated with the direct payment system as very, very serious problems. The problems were tantamount to pitting the youth against the state. Hey! Hey. I am not so sure about that last line though, but okay. Hey, Ngoba phela no one is pitting the youth against the state, but the state itself. period. I must also commend saus for not selling out or backtracking, unlike Safeta, which has been, Safeta's missing in action, honestly speaking. Hey, I mean, they should have been by their side advocating for students, but then again, who am I kidding? It just baffles me how Blade is still there with his deputy, because again, they have been failing students of this country without fail, and no amount of PR or image sanitation will do. Okay, as we can see, the potential reduction of NSFAS funding can actually have far-reaching consequences for students, their families, and even broader societal development. It is also scary how not so long ago a certain minister was out here justifying why his department needed the money that they claimed would aid in job creation by March 2024, when we are about to end this year and we haven't heard of any job creation or them actually doing anything good besides them trending for all the wrong reasons and corruption allegations. Now let's look at some potential alternatives and solutions that could alleviate the impact of reduced NSFAS funding from the National Treasury. Here, Minister of Finance. Anywho, one approach could be to seek increased support from private corporations and philanthropists. By partnering with external stakeholders, NSFAS could actually access additional funds to bridge the gap left by this reduction in government funding, should they go forward with it. Another possibility would be to reassess the distribution of funds within the NSFAS budget. And honestly speaking, they really need to fix their administration. Something is not something over there when it comes to admin, guys. Literally. Like, something is definitely not something when it comes to how they administer things there. And I think this is why the corruption and these corruption scandals just come out, because people's intentions are just not where they should be. I don't, you know. Anywho, let me continue before I start politicking. By implementing a more targeted approach that focuses on students from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, coming up with a strategy that is also going to accommodate your missing middle that they referenced in the article, right? And the postgraduates that Saus also made mention of, okay? So that people actually get the assistance that they need, ne? Another possible way for them to deal with this would be to reassess how they distribute these funds. I think I said that, but I'm going to come back and say it again, because I feel like they don't, like, something is wrong with their authentication process. When you need them the most, these people just do not pitch. But when you actually do not need them and the next person does, all of a sudden they're here for you and not there for them. And then it just becomes a problem on its own. That's why I'm saying, NSFAS, you cannot have students that are always striking or protesting because you guys are failing them all the time. Don't you guys ever get tired of trending for the wrong reasons? And you that are supposed to be pumping money into NSFAS government, I mean, the minister, let me just not politic. I'm trying so hard not to get into it, guys. But this, for me, it hits home because, it just hits home. And we're not here for this. We really aren't. So when they implement a more targeted approach and they focus on the students that need their help the most, the scheme could ensure that they actually help them and that they provide them with the necessary support. Alongside these suggestions, it is also essential for government and policymakers to recognize the long-term benefits of investing in education. They must recognize it not just by saying or by the eyes, but actually even when it comes to the things that they implement and the actions that they take. I feel like as a country, we've reached a stage where we're just tired of the slogans. We're tired of the singing. We're tired of the promises, because they've made these promises, but delivering is just something that they don't know how to do. And we're good, because instead of our situation improving, things just keep on getting worse. And people get angry when you point out the flops that they're doing, that happen, the things that just go wrong in their departments. People end up becoming personal, and all of a sudden they feel attacked. But then again, if you were actually doing your job and your intention was clear from the onset, I don't think we would be where we are right now. So the victim mentality is not going to help you guys at this point. You who are in charge of these departments, you ministers, it's not. It really isn't. And the promise making, because you're just making things worse. You are just making things worse. It is essential for government and policymakers to recognize the long-term benefits of investing in education. I'm going to say that again. Because a well-educated workforce does not only drive economic growth, but it helps reduce income inequality and address social challenges. After this COVID-19 lockdown that we come from, the job losses that came out of it, and everything else that came with the pandemic, let me calm down. Anywho, in closing, it's clear that a reduction in NSFAS funding could have severe consequences for thousands of students that are seeking higher education next year. From limited access to increased loan burdens, the long-term impacts on students, their families, and the nation as a whole cannot be understated. If you haven't already, please register to vote. We need to see the change we know we deserve as a nation. We are tired of the empty promises. We truly are.
That marks the end of today's video. Thank you so much for lending your eyes and ears. I hope that you found today's video informative. Please do not forget to click on that subscription button or light the notification bell so that you do not miss out on any new uploads. Enkosini.